We
Did you
are
ever get a
with.
chance to interview Coach Wooden? Excuse me for interrupting before
Oh
we.
no, you're all good. No, I did not. I actually got to interview Coach Powers. I will send you that interview. He talks about you
Oh,
thoroughly in that. I don't know if
okay.
you've seen that or not.
No.
So, and I think we just lost Coach Powers. What, maybe 2 years
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah, we sure did.
So,
We sure
yeah.
did. Uh,
As you can see, everybody, Michael Warren is with us. And Michael, will you show everybody what kind of shirt you're wearing there today?
well, first, Billy, you can't call me Michael, man. You're from Indiana. You're a Hoosier. Anybody from South Bend or Indiana know me as Mike. You
All
know,
right, cool.
I became Michael because I wanted to become an actor, and I wanted to kind of blur the lines between an athlete and an actor. I didn't want to be known as an athlete turned actor. So, as small of a change as going from Mike to Michael as it is, it was interesting how people didn't connect the two. Of course, when they saw me, then it was another thing. But so don't out of respect enough, and I appreciate that. Don't call me Michael unless you want to. That's cool. But for most people from Indiana, when they call me Mike, I know they've known me the longest. We have history, and though we now is the first time that we're meeting, we have history because we're from the greatest basketball state in the world. And as you were saying, I'll stand up so that you can
Yeah, baby.
see. And I'm very, very proud of. I have a number of these shirts, and uh, going into the Indiana Hall of Fame was one of the greatest honors of my life, to be honest, in 1990. And uh, I remember we lost to Muncie Central. I'm gonna be jumping all over the place, so excuse me, but we lost to Muncie Central. We beaten them in the regular season uh, at their place, which is really hard to do. Um, and I remember they had some guy who had a hand puppet, and he would stand at the end of the like at the end of the court, depending on what half Muncie Central was on, and it was like a bear cat, and he would mimic. It was the funniest thing. We had to have a police escort out of Muncie Central because we beat them, and of course they beat us in the finals by 4 points, and we beat them by 4 points. Well, the point of the story is that Glenda Terrain, who became a friend of mine, who played on that team, and Glenda was a great player, and we talked about going to the same university. We were going to, be a duo, and we even took some trips together. But when UCLA came a call, and then I remember talking. I said, have you heard anything from UCLA? No, they're not recruiting me. Well, I got an offer from them, and that's where I'm going to go to school. So who do we play in 1967 but Dayton, Ohio? And who was on that team? Glenda Terrain. Now, in my mind, maybe I'm making this up, but this is the way I remember it. It would be interesting to see if he has any memories of this. And we beat them, and we kind of met at the half court or something after the game, shaking hands, and I said something like, "Now we're even. Wow, we're even." you know, and and he said, and it was quick, and it's so true. He said, "But I have an Indiana State championship." Billy, I've said from day one, I have two championship rings. I would give one of them up to have a gold Indiana State championship ring. That's how much Indiana basketball meant to me when I played it, and still, games are foggy, but just the experience and knowing what Indiana basketball meant back in those days, you know. Um, it was truly, truly an honor to go into the Hall of Fame. It was truly an honor to have played at South Bend Central after Sylvester Coleman and John Coleman and Herbie Lee and Lee McKnight and Castle Ross and people say, well, who were your heroes, and expected me to name a professional basketball player. But we didn't have professional teams in Indiana. There was Chicago Bulls, but they weren't very good back in those days. And so my heroes were those guys who played at Central before me. The Coleman brothers. John Coleman was Mr. Basketball in 1957, and 1953, Elmer McCall took a team downstate. He won two championships. 57, they were undefeated. So I mean, I get excited talking about those guys because they paved the way for me. Oscar was a little bit ahead of me, but talking to my brother about Christmas Addicts and those great, great teams who couldn't ride that fire truck. It was sad, sad things, but it was time. That was the time we were living in, unfortunately. But have very, very fond memories playing with the guys that I played with at Central, and definitely was one of my finest times as a basketball player, and not winning that state. I mean, I have my runner-up rings for sure, but it's not gold. It's not gold. Uh, but it was really funny when he said, "Yeah, but I have an Indiana championship ring."
Who introduced you to the game of basketball?
Probably my mom. When I was, a little guy, they got me a basketball, and I used to bounce it around the house all the time. And when we moved out to the north side, I started playing in the third grade, as I said, and the guy who had the most impact on my life as a third grader was Paul Sloan, and then a guy from the neighborhood, Tootie Wilson. So those two guys saw the promise before anybody else did. Maybe my mom did. She used to always say, well, you got your basketball talents from me. My father was a football player, but she played basketball. So I would have to say it was probably her getting me this ball and me bouncing it all the time ad infinitum. But the one who cultivated it was Paul Sloan. And then,
And
just having the, um, so, it was God given. There's no question. I played a position. Now they call it point guard. Back in those days, what we called it a playmaker. And you had to be able to score, and you had to be able to pass. You had to be able to. You were an extension of the coach, and so I had great coaching, and I named Paul Sloan at elementary, Don Kaz at Measle and junior high school, Jimmy Powers at South Bend Central. Those three guys honed my game to the point where the time I got to UCLA, having Coach Wooden, who had coached in my high school, right? In the 1946, I think he ended up leaving, going to Indiana State. But having those guys as my coach who taught me the fundamentals, and I always to this day say the right way to play the game. Um, I'm indebted to them. And so by the time I got to UCLA, I kind of knew the UCLA system without knowing it, because those guys had taught it to us in middle school and in high school.
Mike, tell me a little bit about your parents. Were they born and raised in Indiana, also in South Bend?
No, my mother was born in Mississippi, Tupelo, Mississippi, and my father was born in Paducah, Kentucky. My mother's family migrated to Kentucky. My older brother and sister were both born in Paducah. I used to always kid them growing up. I said, I'm the only Yankee, you know. I'm a Northerner. You guys are Confederates, you know. Um, but they, you know, were born in the South. My father left when he married my mom, had two children, left Kentucky, going to find work. Went to New Jersey, and then heard about Studebakers and Bendix and South Bend, and so he ended up in South Bend on the lake, which was a governmental. It was a government. It was what's the term? Really governmental housing. It was a projects, and we lived in a one-story home that had a connecting wall to another family. So these were big, long government housing, as I said, with one wall being shared by another family. My father worked at the South Bend Tribune, the newspaper there, as a janitor, and he had a trash truck, so he hauled trash. Poor by most standards, but we never knew, you know. I never wanted for any meal, never starved for any meal. We had clean clothes, and my mother ironed. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, but she also cleaned houses, you know, for white families. And so my experience was one not of a lot of material things, although some of the kids that I grew up with thought we were quote unquote rich because I never wanted for a meal. I always had a hot meal. My mom was always in the home, always had a father and a mother there that worked hard, and raised three kids. Two of us went to college and got degrees. My older brother always wanted to be a dentist, but ended up getting married, had a child, and you know, my family had Christian values, you know, and so I grew up in a home where we prayed before meals and we gave thanks. We went to church on Sundays, and we were very community oriented. My father worked at the Tribune, and he would get toys. Uh, and we thought these toys would be for my brother and sister, and he would give them out, take them back to where we grew up, and give them out to kids who didn't have fathers in the home or didn't have a way of getting gifts, you know. And so I had terrific parents, man. I'll tell you a story about the two of them. When I had decided that I was going to go to UCLA, and I was on campus for a year, I came back home, and at that time, my sister was away at school. My brother was married and had children, and we're sitting my sister was married and had children, and she was in Portland, Oregon, sitting around the dinner table, and my father looks over at my mother and he says, "Should we tell him, Mom?" And I'm looking at back and forth, like, tell me what, you know? And I won't mention the school, but there's a school had offered to pay the mortgage off on my family's house. And they were going to give me a car and all these other things. And they never once told me. I said, "What? Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because we knew that if we had told you that, it wouldn't have been where you wanted to go to school. And you would have wanted to do something for us, and we wanted you to go where you wanted to go. Now, these are two people who, from the time I was in the third grade, going all the way through high school, saw every game that I played where it didn't conflict with my father's working, and traveled downstate when we were in those tournaments. And here I'm going 2,500 miles away, and they would never see me play on a regular basis unless we would play at Chicago. And they went to Louisville, and we were in the finals. But they sacrificed seeing me grow up, essentially. My father had a brother who lived in California and was married. They didn't have any children, so they really adopted me as their son. And the four of them were so close, really so close. And but that was the kind of parents that I had, man. I mean, I think about kids, not so much nowadays because they're making more money than than anything with the NILs and all of that. But you know, I think of parents who rode on the backs of their children, taking monies under the table and doing all kinds of things, essentially sacrificing their kids, and here to pay off the mortgage of my father's house when he was, he had a trash truck and it was a janitor, honest living. But don't you think that they could have used something like that? Yeah, of course. But they were honest people, man, and I'm indebted for them because my life would have been totally different had I done something like that. And you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You're not, you're taking something not because you love the. Am I kind of blocked off there?
No, you're good.
Okay, I see what I mean. Um, you're taking something not necessarily because you earned it, but they're bribing you to come to their school, and those things never work out. I remember talking to a buddy of mine who had a son who was really talented, and I was, have you thought about UCLA? Well, what are they going to offer me? What are they going to offer you? They're going to offer you a scholarship, and you're going to be coached by a man who will influence your life for the rest of your life. They went somewhere else, and it was a horrible experience. Horrible experience. And so I look back on that day as transformative, because it definitely would have my life would have been entirely different had and they told me and I did the wrong thing. Because I mean, the wrong thing and the right thing. The right thing is doing something for your parents, and then the wrong thing because you're taking money to go to a school, and just wasn't brought up that way.
You're 16, 17, 18 years old. You're in Indianapolis. You're at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Did you have any idea, or what did you want to do in life? What did you foresee yourself doing? Did you have any idea you were going to be an actor? You were going to play on 2 NCAA championship teams. You were going to be next to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor. What was going through Mike Warren's head at that age? I know it's a loaded question. My apologies.
No, I laugh because at 16 and 17, there's nothing going through your head. What am I going to eat for dinner tonight? Can I call Barb on the phone? Can I see Donald Smith, my buddy? Just no idea. I wasn't recruited by UCLA. there was a gentleman who named Paul Sloan and a name, Don Coss, named Jim Powers, Tootie Wilson, of course, uh, parents of friends of mine, Wade Fuller's mother. No one would know these people, but people in the community where I grew up, where I was born. I was born in a house on the lake, 103 South Falcon, not because we couldn't go to the hospital, but, my mom had a midwife and to help her, and I was just born, that's where I was born. But I'm walking, I'm a senior, don't know where I'm going to go to school. I'm going to different places. I was supposed to be flown on a jet to Michigan. I had visited Kansas, had a number of offers. Um, and so I'm walking down the hall, and a guy named Walt Kendi, who had been my geometry teacher, comes out of his class. Now, Walt Kendi, a superb teacher, but he also kept stats on our basketball team, and he traveled with us, you know. And he comes out of his office, out of his room, and he says, have you decided where you're going to go to school? I said, no, not really. And I kind of told him places I'd been and that I was going to go see Michigan. And he said, well, Johnny Wooden is a friend of mine. We're talking 1964. They had won the national championship 30-0. But, growing up in the Midwest, you don't get news from the far West like the next day. You don't in real time. So in college basketball, it wasn't that big. I knew UCLA had won. I knew about Walt Hazard, having been a great player. I didn't know really anybody else on the team because you couldn't watch it on television. At least I didn't watch it. And again, going back to it was also during the time of Indiana basketball, the sectionals, regionals, and so I was more in tune with that than I was college basketball. So I said, yeah, I know of him, but he said, well, he's a friend of mine, and do you mind if I reach out to him, call him or write? I don't know if he said call him or write him. Uh, Now I heard Johnny Wooden, but I also heard UCLA, California. So, so I said that would be great. So within a week's time, I get a letter back from the assistant coach, Jerry Norman, and a letter from John Wooden inviting me out to come visit. Mid-March, snow on the ground, South Bend, cold as heck, and take a plane. I've got a wool hat to cover my ears, uh, overcoat, and I get off the plane and I'm getting ready to go into the terminal, and the heat hit me. Now I'm 18, but I'm probably going 16. I'm really 16 going on 18, or 18, but I really mentally is like 16-year-old. I can't fathom how you can have snow on the ground in Indiana because I hadn't been anywhere. When I was recruited, that was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. So I was as green as a green apple, man. I was naive, and I can't figure it out. Going down the highway, and I see orange groves. We get oranges in crates. Oh, I didn't realize. I knew pears growing on trees, knew apples, because we lived out on the north side. We lived in at that time it would have been called the country because it was undeveloped. Our house was here, a big field with trees, and it was really desolate. And so I'm driving down the freeway, and we get to the campus. Now at March, there's nothing happening on campus. It's a spring break. guy named Kenny Washington. To this day, I will kid Kenny Washington. I was like, man, you only gave me a T-shirt. Where, where's the per diem and all this? you know? And so there were no parties. I didn't meet any girls. But I met John Wooden in these split pea green, awful looking temporary offices because they're going to be building Pauley Pavilion. You know, UCLA didn't have their own home court. They had to travel uh, uh, to other places to play their home games. So I'm sitting across from him, and of course we knew some of the same people. At least I knew the parents. You know, they're people that he coached. Pete Donaldson was a player of his, and I knew his daughter. I went to high school with his daughter, and there were other parents who had played for Coach Wooden. And then we talked about those individuals, but he was all about coming to UCLA, and it wasn't like some of the other places. You come here, you're going to start as a sophomore. You know, I've seen you play. This is what coaches would tell me. I've seen you play, and I think you have a great future. All so you come here, you're going to get an education, and you're going to have fun playing basketball here. You know, and but it's education first. We want you to get a college degree. I think that would make your parents proud, and it certainly would make us proud. Now, going back to Walt Kindig, I never knew Walt Kindig had been a basketball court. He was so much like John Wooden, humble. If you look in the Indiana Hall of Fame, he's in the Indiana Hall of Fame as a coach. Never knew this. I played, on the varsity 4 years. He never once mentioned, I used to be a coach. And, I'm in the Hall of nothing. I found that out after the fact. And and so when he did all these wonderful things, and he was another person that whenever I would come into town, there were certain people, parents of friends, that I would make a point to see because they made such an impact on my life, and Walt Kennedy was one of those guys. And I mean, as much as Jim Powers saw me play every day, he never mentioned UCLA. It was Walt Kennedy, and I was like, Mr. Kennedy, why did you think that I would be able to play for John Wooden? He said, because he was from Indiana, and I knew that, I knew his character. You know, uh, he was a religious man, but he didn't throw his religion. I knew your parents were church going people, and so he was attuned more than anybody else was, and obviously it worked out. But I was indebted to him to be able to see how I played and knew that I would fit into John Wooden's system, and I did, playing as a sophomore. I remember my roommate was Freddie Goss, who is still one of my best friends to this day. And he had been on the 65 championship. And about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear this scream, loud pain. It was Freddie. He was suffering, something was going on in his stomach. And I had to call up the front desk, had the ambulance, and now he would have started. And I remember feeling guilty because this was like one of my best friends, and I felt that he would have started in my place. And I remember telling Coach Wooden, it's like, this was after I graduated, and gosh, Freddie getting hurt, I really felt bad. Felt like I was was taking his place, and he said, Coach Wooden always had this little twinkle, you didn't know if he was gonna give you a zinger or if he was gonna pat you on the back, and he said, I think we would have found a place for you to play, you know, but it was 3 years that was wonderful to play for him and to be a part of his family. I got to be really, really close to him after I played, and that was really a treat too.
Just in we chatted for about 10 minutes before we started the interview, and just in that time frame, you know, a lot of people felt like you were snubbed from the Indiana All-Star team your senior year.
Mhm.
But I look at you, I don't think you felt snubbed. Did you felt snubbed? Did you take that
Yeah,
personally, or
yeah.
you have perception and reality? I want reality.
Well, yeah, no, because I thought, I mean, not only myself, Vernon Payne, who is a friend of mine, who is one of the all-time great, great players to come out of Indiana, and he was an alternate, but we both should have made it, uh, I, I, there's no question that I should have been on that team.
Well, but
And,
but
and
the snub did not define you.
oh no, no, no,
No,
no,
no.
no, absolutely not. And in fact, it fueled me to it motivated me to prove those sports writers incorrectly. And in fact, when Ed Snyder did his book on Indiana basketball players, I wish I had a copy of it. But he interviewed, I think it was McCormick. No, played for the Bucks. Played with Kareem, in fact. It was Indiana guard Macmillan. Was it Macmillan? See, I'm old, man. You're younger than me. You're an Indiana historian, Billy. Dang, what the heck are you doing back there?
McLaughlin, John McLaughlin.
John McLaughlin. He interviewed him. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And in his story, he talks about because he was snubbed and or snubbed. He should have made the team. I guess snubbed is the word. And and I guess there was a sports writer back who said that I should have also made the team. There were two guys left off our team. I would say three because Vernon Payne was incredible as a basketball player and a terrific football player as well. And in fact, married a South Bend uh, girl who was a cheerleader on the basketball team when I played. And we asked, it's like, how did you come in our hometown and steal one of the finest looking girls in South Bend, but they both went to IU. And obviously he had a great career at IU and has done extremely well long afterwards. But yeah, I felt snubbed, and he did too. Um, but being selected to be on that Hall of Fame team, and then having the career that I did as a player, and being on two national championship teams, being an All-American and all conference and all those kinds of things. It, it, they don't replace being Indiana All-Star, but they became palliative, um, and it is what it is. But yeah, I should have been on that team. And
So,
I say
so
that, and I'm normally a fairly humble person, I think, but I have no humility when it comes to Indiana basketball. Yeah, I should have been on that team.
But the story of being snubbed or being disrespected, the way your life turned out, like you said, it fueled you. You know,
Yeah,
I try to leave that story alone about being snubbed, just how well you did on
right.
your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were guys that I played against who were on that team that I played well against, and um, for a long time I thought it might have been racial. May have played some of it because there weren't any black guys on that team, but I think a lot of it had to do with most of those sports writers were in central and southern Indiana. We were never really well represented when we were coming up, unless we won a state championship like John Coleman and Sylvester, and they, of course, deserved to be on that team. But if you play Indiana basketball, play on any high school Indiana, well, going from elementary, winning the state championship is way high on the list, and being an Indiana All-Star, being one of the best players to come out of the state, is what is a goal. And when it's not met, and you know that it had nothing to do with your ability and your playing, um, uh, yeah, it hits you in the wrong place, but it is what it is. But those sports writers are the ones who voted on it, because there had been black players who had made the Indiana team. Um, I don't know why none were on that particular 64 team. It should have been. As I say, Vernon, if not me, Vernon. Vernon led the conference in scoring, um, and he had an outstanding, uh, 3 years at Michigan City, Elston. But one of us, if not both of us, should have been on it.
Yeah, and I consider Vernon Payne the original 23, not Keith Smart at Indiana University. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
And a great coaching career too. I mean, I think he brought
yeah.
magic to Michigan State, right?
And just he's done great as an administrator. He's a phenomenal father. He's educated. He's just a good guy, man. Um, when we played against one another, I guess we kind of have melded together through his wife, because I knew her really well, and I know that any kind of honor for that, where I'm being honored by Indiana, not so much now, but I make it a point, you guys need to check on Vernon Payne too, because he is without question one of the greatest players to come out of the state of Indiana. And if you don't talk to him, then you're doing a disservice to Indiana basketball.
Mike, so you get out to UCLA your freshman year and you're on campus. Did you feel like you made the right decision, or did it take you a little while to get acclimated to the California
Oh, it
lifestyle?
definitely took me, 'cause I was 18, but I was really young, man. I'd never been anywhere, and I almost flunked out my first year, man. I was trying to sow my oats, wild oats, man. I was partying, and I remember getting the phone call message. The coach wouldn't want to see you, wants to see you. And now, in my mind, it's not about anything. It's about, I'm a freshman, I'm a sophomore. It's about the upcoming season. It's so I'm walking into the, how you doing, coach? Sit down. That's a different tone. I haven't heard that before. Oh my God. So now I'm nervous, Said, and I don't remember it, just, you are going to flunk out. You're not putting the effort that you need to put in to get the reason why you're even here. It's not to play basketball. You know how disappointed your parents are going to be, and I remember I have the letter. I remember sending me a letter to my parents and, and saying I was doing fine, blah, blah, blah. But he said he's a little bit too social. He's a little too social, and, and, and he was right, and that upcoming year, I was like an academic All-American, man. Because I definitely didn't want to flunk out of school and be an embarrassment to myself, to my parents, to UCLA, but I went there thinking that meeting was going to be about something else completely. I, I probably wanted to high five him, hey, coach, sit down. Woo!
Is that the most stern he had been with you?
Yeah, and since then, you know, that was the one and only time that I can remember him being really upset with me as a person, because it had nothing to do with basketball, as a person. And I got the message, and he was right. He was right. Um, he was incredible. I'm going to jump ahead to tell you, because most people don't know the side of Coach Wooden that is really humorous, funny. After I stopped playing, I was acting. I started to lose my hair. Right? At 25, I remember playing a 17, 18-year-old high school student on 222, room 222, which was starred a guy from South Bend. Um, and Sonny Haynes was his name. And a guy on the catwalk who I was friendly with came down during lunch and he said, Sotto voce, you're losing your hair. He said, what? He said, yeah, when the lights hit you, you can see that you're playing a high school student. So I was, and this, again, I didn't go pro, but I was playing on these celebrity teams, and one of the guys who had arranged the team, um, uh, I'm sorry, it was my wife.
Okay.
I'm doing it. Okay, I'm on a Zoom call. That's okay. Love you. Bye bye.
That's awesome.
Life interrupting life.
That is fine.
And so this guy who organized the team that Rudy LaRusso was on, Elgin Baylor, Sandy Koufax, um, Tommy Davis, these great, great professional athletes. And so this guy wore a hairpiece, And so he and I started talking, and he told me about a place where I could get one made. So now I've got a girlfriend at the time who was at my apartment. And so I leave on a Saturday. She has no idea where I'm going. She's asleep. So I go to this place. Now I'm going for a consultation. And I'm sitting in the chair and we're talking. And I guess I must have fallen asleep or something because I don't remember having a conversation. The next thing I know, he's cut all of this off. Now I've got a mohawk without the hair, man. I'm Bozo the Clown. Now I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I thought you wanted me to fit you for a hairpiece. No, I wanted a consultation. Okay, go ahead. So now when I leave there, it looks like I have a helmet on. because I went from almost a flat top to now. And so, and I don't have a key to my apartment because I know my girlfriend is there. So I have to ring the doorbell. So she looks through the peephole and sees this guy with, she's, I could hear her laughing. She opens the door. What have you done? and, and so, and I recant this. I mean, I would tell her the story about the guy, and and man, Billy, let me tell you, uh, you will never have to wear a hairpiece. But I went from wearing the hairpiece to the hairpiece wearing me. And I could not wait to get out from under this. I was in prison, man. I remember doing Hill Street. and, and and so when I wasn't doing Hill Street, I wouldn't wear the hairpiece, right? But now the Hill Street is kind of like a hit. And I'm getting offers for cast members to go out and do these interviews, and so the publicity department, and I'm feeling comfortable without wearing it. I'm me. It's it appeals to my vanity because I looked younger, you know, and, and so when you go out on these interviews, the people like to see the character. They want to see Bobby Hill. They want to see you, but they like to see the character. Okay, I can be Bobby Hill. But man, there would be some mornings when I'd be rushing and I'd put on a hairpiece and it was supposed to fit here, and, and it would be back here. And, and Bruce Weiss, who played Belker on the show, he'd say, looks like Little Willie is a little far back.
You know what, though? It's funny, Mike, because the fun thing about doing this was I watched a lot of stuff with you in it.
Right.
And last night we sat down and we watched, both my wife and I watched you in your white shadow.
Yeah, right.
And my wife goes, is he wearing a hat? And we paused it and we're looking at it. Was it that right about that time period?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But I had a hairpiece in though, and I had a hat on, right? So the point of all of this, because going back to Wooden, he had invited a bunch of his former players to come to one of his camps, and he would line us up, and he would go through little stories about each one of us that were pat you on the back, and then one would be funny too. It was all and it was nothing to make you feel bad. It was just in good humor. So he comes to me, and as you can tell, I talk too much. I'm like a run-on sentence, man. And so he comes to me and he says something. Now, I'm like, we're like equals now. I'm a man and you're a man, so you can't make fun of me. I'm going to say something funny about you too. So I said something that was really funny, and it got a laugh, and I envision now Muhammad Ali and what was his nemesis?
Smoking Joe Frazier?
No, not nemesis, but
Howard Cosell.
Howard Cosell. and whenever they would go back and forth, right? Howard Muhammad Ali would make a motion that he's going to lift up that hairpiece. Howard knew, and Muhammad Ali knew that he was wearing a hairpiece. No one else had to know, but so I'm in this line, I get this funny laugh, and Wooden does like this. He goes to my head like he's gonna. I got the message. I didn't say anything else for the rest of the camp, unless I was instructing some of the kids or something. But that was the kind of humor, man, that he had that made it enjoyable to be around him. Long after I played for him. Uh,
When did you meet the big fella?
that's a story too. I was a sophomore, and Wooden chose me to go to the airport to pick him up. I was one of the players, along with Edgar Lacey, who knew Kareem Lou Alcindor uh, from the Ed Sullivan Show. Back in those days, Ed Sullivan used to have the Parade All-American First Team on his show, and they were both. Edgar Lacey was the best player to come out of California. Kareem, the best player on the planet, high school player. So that's how they met. So Wooden, for some reason, chose me to go to the airport to meet him. And he says, you're going to meet Lou Alcindor. He's going to be the tallest person you've ever seen. And your natural instinct is going to be to stare. And he's a very sensitive young man about his height. So whatever you do, don't stare, which meant don't mess this up. You want him to come to UCLA. Do not mess this up. So I go now. I played in high school with a guy named DeWitt Menyard, who was about 6'9", wonderful player, had a career in professional sports. I went to University of Utah, was in their Hall of Fame, played over in Europe, played in the ABA, and also played in France. In fact, played with a guy that I played with at UCLA, Bill Sweek. But DeWitt used to kind of hunch over, used to have to tell him to stand up straight, stand up straight. Kareem gets off the plane and I see him duck. I've never had to duck going through a doorway, getting off the plane in my life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do we get this guy to go to UCLA? Now, we're walking through the airport. Back in those days, the elementary kids and junior high school, most of the elementary kids would do these little paintings, and they would put their pictures in plexiglass and frames, and they were all along the corridors of the LA airport. And I hear this mantra: "Don't look up, don't look up, don't look up, don't look up." And I almost felt, and no disrespect to people who have Tourette, but I almost felt like you telling me something that I shouldn't do, but now I have to do it. I have to I have to look. I have to look up at him. Why would you tell me not to? you know, God. So I we're walking along these pictures, and I can see me easily. I see everything about me, but I'm looking, and I kind of look. This guy, I've never seen anybody as tall. And so, I meet him, and we get along fine. Although he and Edgar Lacey had the relationship, and Edgar ended up taking him all around campus. But my first impression was, man, this guy is the tallest player I've ever seen. Now, he's going to go to UCLA, right? The freshman plays the varsity. When I was a freshman, we probably had one of the worst teams. We were at 12-8 or something. And I'm on the varsity kills us, no contest. So this is what's going to happen with them. I'm on the varsity. That's the way it happens. There's no diversion there. This is what's going to happen. This is the way it's supposed to be. Billy, they beat us so bad. Ended up being and we were ranked number one. And they beat us so bad that at one point, Gary Cunningham, who was coaching, who was a freshman coach, called off their press.
You don't do that.
So, so that it wouldn't be even worse. And I remember after the game, I'm sitting in my locker room and I'm like this. I mean, I can't believe it. And Wooden comes in and he sees all of us. We're like, everybody's head is all down. And he says something to the effect, well, be happy that you guys are going to be playing with them next year. and
That's a zinger.
He goes out to talk to the press. Meanwhile, the freshman team, our doors are closed, run past our locker room, going to the visitors' locker room, and they're yelling, "We're number one! We're number one!" And to this day, a couple of the teammates that I played with, Freddie Goss is one, Kenny Washington is the other. Kenny he had a pulled hamstring. Freddie Goss didn't play. And they both swear if they had played, if Kenny had been 100%, in fact, Kenny went to Wooden and wanted to play them the next day. And I'm talking to both of them at different times. I said, man, we could have played them 10 times and we would have lost 10 times. You know, they got Lucius Allen, high school All-American, the greatest player to ever come out of Kansas City. Len Shackelford, who's a high school All-American from California. You got a guy from Texas who had been really a strong player in Texas. Kenny Heights, who'd been the best player from Northern California. You know, God rest his soul, he has passed on. There's no way, you know, okay, you take Kareem off of that team, we beat them. We beat them. You put him back on, they kill us. You know, it's that simple. He is the greatest college player to ever play the game, and in my book, the greatest pro player. I mean, if I were picking a team, he'd be my first pick, for sure. Over Jordan, over, any of those other great players. But
well, they changed the rules.
Changed the rules for him. No dunks. Didn't hurt my game. But it made him a better player. You know, he really developed that hook that became unblockable for the most part. And he was a great teammate. You know, I think Wooden had a conversation with him and told him, and he pretty much had this similar conversation with me, because as a sophomore, I led I broke Walt Hazard's scoring records and all this kind of stuff. And he talks to Kareem and he says, you can average easily 50 points a game. His first game against Washington State, I think it was against Washington, he scored 56 points.
Yeah.
He said, but we won't win. We will not win. You have a great supporting cast. You know, don't feel that you have to be the guy.
You will.
Be the guy. And he told me too the same thing. You know, you're going to have to sacrifice because we got Kareem. And he made a sacrifice. I made a sacrifice, and all the players who played with Kareem made a sacrifice because he was great, but he was also great to play with.
Mike, tell us your account of the game of the century.
My what?
Your account of the game of the century.
The game of the against Houston. Kareem had a scratch cornea. Couldn't practice. In fact, he was had a gauze over his eye, and we had played them the year before in the semis in Louisville. Was it no, not Louisville? Yeah, I guess it was Louisville. Was it Louisville? No, Louisville was 68. In Dayton, and we beat them in the semifinals really easily. So the game was not the kind of game that wouldn't ever really like to play. He thought it drew too much attention to one game, and one game does not make a season. The conference is the most important season or most important games, and then you go into the tournament. But J.D. Morgan and the athletic director at Houston, and then I guess the coach Guy Lewis were the ones who kind of came up with the idea of playing this game, knowing that both teams were going to be great teams, and with Elvin Hayes, who was a tremendous, tremendous player. And so here we are. The game is scheduled January 20th, 1968, and it was hard to imagine having to play a game in a place like the Astrodome. I mean, they flew the sports arena court out to Houston, and we got this court in the middle of nothing. It's a baseball stadium, and the fans were so far away. And as I said, Kareem had hurt his eye, and this game, it changed the complexion of our team, because in that game, Edgar Lacy, who had started as a sophomore and now he's a senior, and he's expected, he had to sit out 1 year because he had knee surgery. And he was taken out of the game because no one could guard Elvin Hayes, and as going into the game as a competitor, we know it's not a conference game, and we know that it's not as important, but it's important because we're number one, they're number two, and we're competitors, and so we want to beat them again because we had beaten them very easily, and of course they wanted to beat us, and Elvin wanted to. He had said some some things after the game that weren't very complimentary to Kareem, and so we're in the game, and he is unbelievable. He can't miss. Everything he shoots is going in. No one can really guard him. And Wooden takes Edgar Lacy out towards the end of the first half, and he doesn't go back in the game. Now, we don't know the drama that this is creating because we're in the thick of the game. But Shackelford remembers that Kareem is really not effective because he hadn't practiced at all, and he still can't really see that well out of that eye. And as I said, Elvin is having the game of his life. And walking back towards the bench doing a timeout, I say to Shaq, I think I'm going to tell the coach maybe we should not have Kareem in the game, because he's not really effective. And maybe, with Edgar or Jim Nielsen, maybe we'll play differently. and maybe, bring Kareem off the bench. And then Shaq, you're gonna do what? No, I don't think you should do that. So I never said anything, and they end up, the very last play is still very vivid in my mind. I'm on the side. I don't know that Shaq is in back of me. Lucius Allen has the ball, and he throws the ball, and I think it's to me. And I jump up, and it's a little bit high, and I tip it out of bounds. Had it gone to Shaq, he had a shot in the corner. Maybe he would have hit a 3-point or 2-point shot. But they get the ball back, they run the clock out, and they win the game. And we're so angry that we lost. We played not anywhere close to the best game that we could play. They play out of their minds, and they only beat us by 2 points. So if we could have scheduled that game the next day, we would have played it. But, and normally Wooden would say, look, don't get too far ahead. Don't think too far ahead. Play the game that's at hand. But we couldn't help it. Kareem cut out a picture from the Sports Illustrated where Elvin is shooting the shot over his outstretched arms. And there were some very uncomplimentary things that Elvin had said about Kareem. He's not as good as people think, blah, blah, blah. But we couldn't wait to play them, not in Houston, but in Sports Arena. And we were at that level of emotion that we weren't so high that, you come out too anxious. We were at that emotional level that you want to be at when you're competing, that when you have to compete at your best. And I remember at one point we were 40 some points ahead of them, and had John Wooden not called off, sat the first team down, we would have beaten them. Elvin was screaming at his players because they couldn't figure out that we had a diamond and one on him, that Shaq trailed him wherever he would go. And consequently, he couldn't get the ball. He was frustrated. He was shooting bad shots. And he always said that they had a player who couldn't play. Reynolds was his name. And to this day, he, in his mind, thinks that Wooden called the NC2A because the guy, I guess his transcripts didn't transfer or something, and he couldn't play. And if we had him, no, you wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You weren't. It's my video here. Oops.
Yeah, no, you're frozen over there.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, I don't know.
I meant to tell you that because I'm up in the hills.
Yeah,
Voice-wise.
but I'm still getting your the audio, so we're good for that. So
wait, let me.
And I'll pause it on this end here real quick. See if we can. Let's see here.
We were doing well.
Oh, there we go. I got you back.
But you can't take it off the wall. You see behind me are pictures of my family, my mom, my dad, my uncle. There's my mom up there, my aunt who became my second mom. But this was a Sports Illustrated picture that in that '68 game, my last game. Ducky Drake is there, the famous coach, Coach Rayford Johnson, C.K. Yang. The guy next to him was a manager who I'm still in touch with. Went to his daughter's wedding. But in my house, I think I don't have a whole lot of things on the wall. There's another picture. This was against North Carolina.
Yep, yep, yep.
Larry Miller. But I have several pictures of the team, 67 and 68 team, the championship pictures. I have a caricature of that was on TV Guide of the of Hill Street, but for the most part, pictures of family. You know, my kids never saw me play. They could go and check out some films, but they would end up laughing. Those little shorts. They would crack up. You know, they've never really seen anything that I've acted in, and that was purposely. You know, I wanted them to just see me as dad and not some person that was on a screen. So I'm very, very family oriented because I came from that, you know, and most important people in my lives, my family, of course, my friends. But we have to do this again, Billy.
Mike is fantastic. Hey, real quick, three people, and just maybe a real quick story from all three of those people. Do you have a story about Gabe Kaplan, Jack Nicholson, and Red Fox?
Red Fox, I can't tell. uh, um,
And Fast Break was absolutely awesome. I watched it for the first time 2 weeks ago, man. Gabe
yeah,
Kaplan was on spot,
yeah.
and you were the preacher.
Gabe was a tremendous gambler, and Gabe fancied himself as an athlete and a basketball player. He was a tremendous um, sports person, and he loved going to event the sports, the contest. But you know, you got uh, Harold Sylvester, you got Bernard King, who are all great high school. And Bernard, of course, had a tremendous pro career, and players who from UCLA who could play. And this guy visioned himself as being at the same level we were, and wanted to play us in horse and gamble. And we took his little money, man. it, it was really, really funny. But because he's a huge gambler, you know, I mean, and a great gambler, you know, cards, but it was not on the level that we were on and played on. Jack was one of the best people I ever met. I was hired to be a technical advisor on 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 his film, and I was essentially going to help him design the basketball plays and get the basketball players to play. And he, for whatever reason, said, you know, I've seen you play basketball on film, and I think you can play a basketball player. You don't have to really do a whole lot of acting. Just be yourself. And so he gave me a part. Ended up meeting his agent, Sandy Bressler, who became my agent for a while. And then one of the guys in his office took over being my agent. But Jack was, you know, you have this image because I watched every film that he had done up to then. I mean, I was awestruck. You know, there are times couldn't even think straight when I was in his presence because his presence was so big, but he didn't make you feel like he was so big. He made you feel like he was one of the guys. And in dealing with him, working with him, he created an environment that was not intimidating because being on the set for the first time, if you're not have never been on it, time is money, but he had such a relaxed environment that it was just a pleasure of being around him. Um, it was a unique experience, and probably half of the things I can't tell you on that. I wish I could tell you. I could tell you off camera about Red Fox because he was one of the funniest guys. Yeah, there's no way I can clean up the stories.
Mike, how did you get into photography? Where
I
did that
appreciate
passion
you.
ignite?
Yeah, I was. I've always been into photography, going back to when I was at UCLA, but it was primarily taking pictures of guys. The guys, the friends. And before selfies came in, they had the timers on the cameras, and I set a timer and pose my buddies, and all that kind of stuff. Well, when I started having children, they became the focal point. And I also used to, I met a guy on a movie where I was a technical advisor before I started acting on the film. And he was a great photographer. And his name was Johnny K. Taught me just about everything I knew about photography. And I would go out and shoot with him. And he would do portfolios for actors. So I started doing that. I had a photograph of the Jackson Five that appeared in the LA Times. Well, when I was going through marital problems and my wife and I split up, a father and a son, if you can believe it, broke into my place on the valley and stole all of my cameras, plus other things, my memorabilia from UCLA. They caught the guys, um, and ended up. Uh, I'm going to say this because I feel the need to say it. They weren't black and they weren't Latin. They were white. True, it's true, but like how would a father teach his son how to be a thief? But in any event, I eventually got my memorabilia back because they caught the guys and what they couldn't sell, I was able to get back. So when digital cameras came out, I ended up buying a digital camera, and I was coming out of working out at a gym that was on the Motion Picture Hospital campus. And a voice I call God spoke to me and said, "Look up." And I started noticing these incredible cloud formations, which took me all over the city shooting clouds. And as I would look in these photographs, there was always something missing emotionally for me. And so I had a little small 10-inch iPad, and the Apple Pencil came out. I bought it not knowing what I was going to do with it. And that took me into buying apps, Photoshop in particular, that allowed me to really paint on the screen. And it opened up a side of my creativity that I never knew existed. And had I not had that experience, that spiritual experience that I have every time I work on a photograph, because I meditate on it and I try to channel, you know, something coming from above that would inspire me and the photograph, and then I write things that go along with the photograph that hopefully will inspire other people. And so I've had an opportunity to do a couple of exhibitions. I have one of my large photographs in the hotel that's on the campus of UCLA. I'm now working on 3 photographs that's going to go into the Anderson School of Business on their walls, and it's just been a phenomenal place for me to stay creative.
And it's absolutely gorgeous work too. You have a website for all of your pieces?
Yeah, it's www. Michael Warren Photofantasy.
I'll include that in the comments down below of this
Okay.
interview too,
And
everybody.
also, I'm on Instagram, but I'm having a problem with Instagram, and they have my name and the because it's also Photo Fantasy, but it goes to another site on their website. So, but the www.michaelwarrenphotofantasy.com is where people can see some of my work, and I appreciate talking to you.
No problem. Mike Warren, the 15 minutes we had before the conversation, before our interview, absolutely fantastic. I feel like I've known you for years. It's nice to meet you.
Likewise.
We're going to have to do a round 2. I won't start to bother you until after I have Jerry Seasting on, which will be in
Yeah,
2 weeks.
good. What a
So,
player.
yeah. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. I
I
appreciate
have
it.
more questions for you. And I'll put everything in the comments. Thank you so much, and
Appreciate it. God
enjoy.
bless you, man, and your family, and take care.
And you also. Thank
Thank
you.
you.